forth and saying, okay, it's my turn and now it's your turn. It makes it more
Yes.
of a, oh shit, what is he going to take? What is this person going to
Exactly.
take? So yeah, dude, I'm excited. That'll be fun. What do we have here? We have Heretic and Anora. We have the fall movie draft. We have, uh, is it the
Wicked.
complete? Oh, Glicked. We have the Glicked episode, dude. I'm so
Yes,
excited for that.
sir.
The more I've been thinking about both of those movies, the more excited I'm getting.
Dude, me too.
What's your anticipation like in terms? I don't know if money is a thought for you, but when you think of these two movies, and I know it's been hinted at, like, oh, is this going to be our Barbie and Oppenheimer? Do you see
Mm.
any, like, is that where your mind is going? Or are you just more thinking, I'm excited to see these movies and I have no idea what they're going to do financially, and I'm just glad they're coming out on the same day?
I'm excited to see both of them. I enjoy the aspect of like a Barbenheimer if it happens naturally, but I don't love that now for sure. I almost can guarantee that we're going to get these Barbenheimer try to emulate that aspects, which I don't love just because Barbenheimer happens so naturally. And they were polar opposite movies, which Glicked is polar opposites. Those movies could not be further from each other. But I also, hot take here, I think Glicked makes more money overall than Barbenheimer did. I think Glicked is going to make
Whoa.
I think Glicked is going to make like well over 1.5 billion, and then I think Gladiator's going to make probably close to 1 billion. I think it's going to be tight, but I do think that combined Glicked will end up making more. Those theater kids, bro, they're gonna show out for Wicked
True.
multiple times. They're gonna go on opening night. They're gonna go the next night. They're gonna bring their family because their family couldn't go on Thursday, so they're gonna go Saturday. They're gonna go just to sing. Like, they're gonna go on a Tuesday, and I can feel like this is gonna be an event for people. Whereas Barbie and Oppenheimer, it was more just like it's an event because it's Barbenheimer. You get to see Barbie and then you go see Oppenheimer. This is more like Wicked is the event. It's just so happening that Gladiator's also releasing too. And so you get that, for lack of better term, and this is not an insult, that film bro-y Gladiator 2, which is for people who like want to see a grand scope of a movie. And then you get Wicked for those theater kids and the people who want to see something like a musical, really high production value. You know what I mean? So I think the balance there is definitely more interesting than Oppenheimer or Barbenheimer.
All right, that I'm not gonna lie, we're starting off this episode with some hot takes because Gladiator and Wicked making more than Barbie and Oppenheimer. I don't know the total amount, but Barbie and Oppenheimer made roughly, I want to say 2.3, 2.4 billion dollars
Holy
collectively.
shit.
So the first Gladiator made 465 million. However, that was in 2000. So a lot has happened. The, financial route has changed. That could easily increase, just like Dune. I think Dune, the first one made like 400 million and then the second one made 700 million. So this could make a massive jump for the sequel. I am curious because what's like another popular theater production that turned movie. And I would assume Phantom of the Opera is one of the biggest, biggest
Yeah.
adaptations, the 2004 version with Gerard Butler. And that movie, like I'm just pulling it up right now, it made $154 million. Now I get it. It's not Wicked. It's much smaller than Wicked. But damn, dude, I don't know. I don't know if either of them will cross the Billy, to be honest. I think Wicked has a better shot than Gladiator. I think Wicked has a better shot because of the theater presence, because of the attachment to The Wizard of Oz, which has been a Hollywood classic for nearly 100 years. Over under 2 billion? Are you saying over then?
I am saying over, but I'm a little nervous because I forgot Dune Part 2 did not make 1 billion, which I actually thought it would make closer to 2 billion. And that is alarming. That's actually really alarming because if that didn't make 1 billion, then I have serious doubt. That only made 700,000. I have serious doubts that Gladiator's making 500 million. You know what I mean?
Gladiator is more of a welcoming film. Like Dune is so niche, dude. This is a sci-fi film
True.
with characters nobody's ever heard about. And Gladiator, though you're also trying to figure out names and location, it's kind of grounded. It's like in the Gladiator realm, so we kind of understand what to anticipate. Yeah, Dune Part 2 made $714 million. So yeah, I think it's harder. Like, I keep thinking to myself that it's easier to make $1 billion as a film than it really is, because
Yeah.
very few films do it. I mean, Oppenheimer didn't even make $1 billion. They made like 970 million. So they were close to it. Rated R film, so that's impressive. Rated R biopic. Yeah, I'm intrigued. I hope that people do show out. I hope it is an event. I hope it's something that we're talking about, that Glicked turns into something rather than us talking about it on a podcast. Then the weekend comes and nothing happens. And people are like, why? Oh, you're going to see 2 movies and they're polar opposite movies? Cool. Have a great time. Just from a grand scale to give us a jump into this episode, what do you predict? Wicked or Gladiator 2 being more enjoyable?
For me personally, I think I'm going to enjoy Gladiator 2 more just because I'm not a huge musical fan and I never have like loved The Wizard of Oz. I've seen it a handful of times because my mom made me, but as an adult, I haven't seen it. I haven't revisited it. But I will say that the more I see the trailer for Wicked, the more hype I get. It is the trailer's played every time I go to the theaters, and for
Every
some
time.
reason, every single time. And then you have that stupid, I don't know if you get it, but you get that stupid like Apple slash Samsung trailer before
Yeah.
that trailer. And I'm like,
Yes.
oh my God, I should be tired of this. But for some reason, dude, every time it comes on, I just get more excited, which is the polar opposite of how I felt about Oppenheimer and Barbie. By the time Oppenheimer and Barbie came out, I was so glad that I would never have to watch those trailers again. But like now I'm like, okay, I'm actually still really excited to see Gladiator 2 and Wicked. So I say Gladiator 2, but I think Wicked is it's either going to be my favorite theater experience of the year or my least favorite theater experience of the year.
Yeah, and it's so hard. I mean, 2 very big swings visually. I mean, you have one that takes place in Oz. I imagine that's where it I've never seen The Wizard of Oz. I've seen Wicked on Broadway, but I've never seen The Wizard
Hmm.
of Oz. So I don't know the whole landscape, the entire environment around that film. But you have that world that you have to create so much, a lot of set pieces. So the question to me, or the question that I have, I mean, this is a universal film. How big did they swing? Did they build these sets? Did they lean on, okay, we have studio space. Nobody's making movies in our studios right now. Let's just use those and let's create these somewhat stagnant sets that feel like they are theater production, which could work for this type of movie because it is a theater production.
Hmm.
But then you have Gladiator on the other end, which is putting water in coliseums and having sharks, and then they're putting rhinos in coliseums. It's like, oh wow, okay, and you can't really do that, obviously. So how did they do it? Paul Mescal says it's the biggest film he's ever worked on. Denzel Washington says it's the biggest film he's ever worked on. So I, oof, there's a part of me that feels like I will like Gladiator 2 more, but I think I'm more excited for the swing that Wicked has. I think Wicked has way more
Ooh.
pressure on its shoulders. It's the first adaptation for the big screen on a very, very popular theater production. And I just think there's a little bit more pressure there versus Gladiator 2. It's like, yo, Ridley, you've had 20 plus years to decide whether you wanted to make this thing or not. So hopefully
Right.
the story is there after 20 plus years because God damn it, in 20 years, I will have a very good story. I promise you that. Um, let's jump into this, dude. Let's jump into this. Welcome everybody. Welcome back to After Credits. This has been a fun time for movies. I feel like we're getting into the swing of big movies. We're getting into the swing of Oscar contending movies. We're kind of, I don't know, I guess circling out the end of the year when it comes to films. And sometimes, if anybody's new to kind of the film schedule, January through May-ish, April, it's really tough. And then April/May all the way through to August, you have some swings. And then August and September tend to be a little tougher. And then you kind of go into the big months for movies, October, November, December. And that's where we're at. And I think this episode is really going to show us what that's about because we have 2 big movies, 2 big studios that are seen actually, I mean, they're smaller, but they're kind of making bigger swings as we go. So before we jump into that, I do have some movie news. And this is about a different studio, a different company, but a big company, a very, I guess, reputable company in modern culture right now. And that's Netflix. And my question to lead off this news segment is Netflix's reputation taking a bad turn? And the reason I'm asking that is because the film Wuthering Heights sparked a bidding war between Netflix and Warner Brothers. And the film is directed by Emerald Fennell, who did Promising Young Woman. She did Saltburn. She's definitely one of those modern filmmakers who are trying to kind of poke the bear a little bit, really dig
Yeah.
in and kind of show us, hey, comedically, but also in a thrilling way, here's the shit that's going on in the world. The film will star Margot Robbie and Jacob Elordi, and I believe Margot Robbie's production company is behind this. So even though Netflix offered $150 million for this project, the filmmakers decided to go with Warner Brothers, who offered $80 million. So nearly half the financial impact that Netflix was willing to offer, but Warner Brothers offered a wide theatrical release and a full marketing campaign. So with this big, $70 million leaving on the table, what does this tell you about the future of filmmaking in theatrical and streaming markets?
I love this decision so much. I am so glad that they took this route because I think all movies that like Netflix has these movies that they're strangling to death because they keep them on their platform. And we saw this with Maestro last year. They release it in theaters for a weekend, and
Yeah.
it's like a handful of theaters scattered across the country, and then they pull it immediately, and then you have to wait a month for it to be on Netflix. And that, I understand their position is, well, we want people to come to our platform. That's how we make our money. I understand. I get that. But that's not how you entice people like Emerald Fennell, Margot Robbie's production company, because they want that theatrical experience. They're making these movies
Yes.
for these massive screens with these incredible surround sound speakers and stereos. And that's what this is for. It is for the experience of going to a theater. We have talked about it before on this podcast. Watching a movie at home is vastly different than watching it in a theater. And part of that is just the vibe and the energy. Even if you are alone in the theater, like I watched Longlegs the second time I saw it, I was alone in the theaters. It adds even more to the experience I have because I'm in a public space. I'm alone watching this movie
Yeah.
that is so intense and so creepy because of the atmosphere that it makes me like the movie even more. Sitting at home and watching something like this, there's too many distractions. I know that in theaters there can be distractions, but at home there are far more distractions. And I think people who create movies want undivided attention, or at least the space to have undivided attention. There are always going to be detractors, but for the most part, people go to the theaters to experience a movie. And that's what they want. And I don't know if you've had this experience happen, but when you go to the movie theater, sometimes it'll pop up and it'll be the creators of the movie, the director, the writer, and then the stars. And they'll say, thank you for coming to the theater to watch this movie, where movies are supposed to be viewed. And I love that because it's so true.
Mm.
Let's fight back against this straight to streaming bullshit. I will never get behind it because, one, you're leaving money on the table, and two, you're leaving out a massive chunk of the audience. There are subsects of people who do not subscribe to Netflix. They don't have any streamers, and they're going to miss out on these movies, and therefore you're missing out on money. You could absolutely put these in theaters and still have the guarantee of coming to Netflix, because there are going to be people who don't want to go to the theater, and they will wait a month for it to come out on Netflix. So why not get it in theaters if you're automatically going to turn around and put it on VOD a month later, which we're seeing more and more now? So why not give it a longer theatrical release, or just a theatrical release in general? So I am all for this. I love this. I think every movie should get a chance to be on the big screen. And Netflix, I think this is a statement that has been made for them, or made to them, by these production companies that are saying, we will no longer allow you to Christopher Nolan us. Which, by that I mean the whole Tenet scenario, where they took Tenet and they're like, we're going to put it right on HBO Max, and he was like, no, the fuck
Yeah.
you're not. So I mean, let's do that more often. Let's pull the Christopher Nolan, let's pull the Emerald Fennells and Margot Robbies, and just have them go to theater and give us the experience that we all crave and want.
Wow. We are cooking early on a Monday morning. I love it, Kyle. I love it. I could not agree more. I do think there's like a separation of want and desire. I feel like Netflix is coming at this with the angle of, hey, we got money and we have people looking at our service. Don't you want both of those? And I feel like Emerald Fennell and Margot Robbie and even Jacob Elordi, with the projects he chooses, they're looking at this as, hey, we want a viable company to back us who will allow our film to create an experience. We don't want to just get in front of people. We want it to be an experience. Emerald Fennell only makes movies that are truly meant for a theatrical experience. Saltburn
Absolutely.
and Promising Young Woman are so twisty with so many turns that you want to watch that with company in a theater and not be distracted. You want to actually put them in a place where they're going to go out of their way to watch something, rather than scroll for 2 hours and say, I guess I'll watch Wuthering Heights. I mean, that's a new movie on Netflix. Why not? and then you end up looking at your phone for 40% of the time, and then you don't even remember what happened, and you don't get the big swing at the end. That is not what filmmakers want. And so I like that filmmakers are actually the ones switching the tides, or like turning the tables to some degree, because Margot Robbie and Emerald Fennell could easily say, yeah, give us the money. Or they could even say, hey, you're willing to offer $150 million. Why don't you just match Warner Brothers, who offered 80, and then spend the other $70 million on marketing and a theatrical release? Because to me, if that's what they want, Netflix needs to be flexible. There's no
Mhm.
reason why they can't say, hey, why don't we put our movies in theaters where more people will want to watch our content anyway? So if we put a Netflix movie out there and then promote our platform, then people will then leave the theaters and then go home and go to our platform. I just don't see why they see that as a problem to diversify where they're getting their consumers. They can't just get them all on streaming. I don't know. It just feels really wrong. And I like that this decision was made. I like that Margot Robbie and Emerald Fennell said, no, fuck it. Like, our movie deserves something bigger than Netflix. And look what happens. Like, this is just a fact. Movies get buried underneath the dirt when they go on streaming. They get buried underneath all of the shittiness around them, because there's a ton of bad projects, a ton of good projects, and a ton of projects nobody even knows whether it's good or not, because nobody takes the time to watch them. So if you have that in comparison to, hey, you're going to be one film out of 7 that are playing over the course of these 6 weeks, that I like those odds better. I like people making a decision between 1 and 7 rather than 1 and 2,000, or however many shows and movies are on the Netflix platforms. So, yeah, we'll see what happens with Wuthering Heights. That's a film that's coming out in 2025. So
I
we'll
real
see.
quickly want to echo two things you said. Appetite is 100% accurate. I am so glad you brought that up. When you have something like Prime, or you have something like Netflix or Paramount Plus, you can scroll for hours, and then you put a movie on because you are defeated, and you just like throw this
Yes.
slop on, and then you don't engage with it the same way you would because you don't want to actually watch this. You're not seeking this out. There's so many movies I've passed over but have wanted to watch, but I'm like, oh, it'll always be there. I'll go back and get it at some point. So I
Yes.
think appetite is a huge portion of it. But I also think when you turn it down, when you turn down an offer like this, I honestly, my respect for Margot Robbie, her production company, Emerald Fennell, everyone involved, skyrockets to the moon. I'm absolutely going to the theater to support this because they're taking a stand, and that means something to me. And I know it's silly to say like, oh, it means something. It's a stand because it's movies and there are other things happening, but it is true. We love movies, so this is important to us, and it is important to keep this, I don't know, part of life alive and afloat. And by doing
Yeah.
that, you have to get movies in theaters, or else it's all just going to be Netflix slop. So my respect through the roof, and like you said, appetite is key. And I think Margot Robbie is creating an appetite for this movie by forcing it to go to theaters.
Yeah. Yep. So I hope that more filmmakers and more production companies will follow suit, as we've seen. I mean, we're going to be talking about Neon and A24 today. They have made a conscious decision to go to theaters, even if it's a little bit more limited, and even if it's smaller, and even if it's harder to market because they got to spend more money. They're making decisions wrapped around the theater rather than wrapped around the streaming platform. And I hope that we see other movies follow suit. For trailer reviews tonight or today, we only have one. We have one, and that is from you, my friend, and that is My Old Ass. This is the Sundance breakout film. I did not get a chance to see this at Sundance. Aubrey Plaza, tell me about this.
Damn, I thought you did see this. Okay. Um, just quick review. I would say stick with it. For me, it was a little tough going because I was led to believe this was going to be a laugh out loud comedy
Mm,
with Aubrey Plaza at the helm. It is not that. It is something completely opposite of what I was advertised. I thought it was going to be insightful and meaningful with a great blend of comedy. It is more so just insightful. And there are moments of comedy in there, but also Aubrey Plaza is just not around for 90% of it. So I felt a little cheated and I felt a little betrayed. So I didn't want to engage with it on its level. But I will be damned if this movie doesn't make you care, if it doesn't pull at your heartstrings, if it doesn't get you invested in the main actress whose name is Maisie Stella or something like that. I'm so sorry, I forget her name, but I'd never heard of her until this movie, and by the end of the movie, I was infatuated. I think she's fantastic with a wonderful future ahead of herself. And the message here is: give yourself a break, make mistakes, like just enjoy life. enjoy life. Don't get bogged down in losing in past regrets and losing yourself in the past. And I think this movie portrays that wonderfully, especially if you engage with it, stick with it, and go in knowing, open your mind a little bit. Don't go in thinking this is some slapstick comedy, because it's not.
So this poses a question. We don't have to stick on this too long. Movies have been, in my opinion, trailers have been improving. I've been getting more hooked to stories based on what I'm seeing. But I'm noticing that trailers are also becoming a little bit more misleading. What are your thoughts?
You're 100% right. This is why anybody who knows me or follows me on anything knows I despise trailers. I truly hate them. I try to avoid them at all costs, but I also have time anxiety, so I end up watching a bunch of trailers in the theater. But if they're just released on my phone, like on Letterboxd, or not on Letterboxd, on Instagram or TikTok, I'm not watching them. I avoid them. I'll share them because I want notoriety for those movies, but I don't watch them because I've come to learn that, one, they're very spoiler heavy, and two, they are often very, very misleading. It happened with Abigail earlier this year. I thought that movie would have done so much better if they had just kept the twist out of the trailer and made it more ambiguous what was going on. And I think for this movie, it's hyped up as this hilarious comedy with a bit of emotion in there, but it's the complete opposite. It's a bunch of emotion with a bit of comedy. And I am so frustrated by that. And I know it's to get asses in seats, but it's like, come on, man. Just give me an honest to God trailer and make it less than 30 seconds.
Well, because I had not seen Cuckoo, but I've heard that about Cuckoo. I did see Longlegs. That was definitely a misleading film. I feel like this is happening more and more with films that I'm going to see. Even Heretic, we're talking about that. I thought the marketing
Yes.
was very different than what I got in
Yes.
theaters. Maybe this was a good segue then. Let's talk about Heretic. Let's talk about
Let's
Anora.
jump
These are two
in, bro.
films. Yeah,
The
these are two
Segway
films.
King.
The Segway King, let's go. These are two films that are, I would say, this is weird because they feel big. They feel very big, but they're not. These are not big films, but they do feel big. And maybe they're big for the movie community and not so much for everybody else. Or maybe I am just delusional and these films are just not big at all. And I'm just thinking that they're big. But Heretic was written and directed by Scott Beck and Brian Woods. They also did A Quiet Place, or at least they wrote A Quiet Place. They recently did 65, so they got a little bit of a shakiness there. This stars Hugh Grant, Chloe East, and Sophie Thatcher. On a budget of $10 million, it has currently made $13.6 million, a little bit more than that at this point, but trending in the right direction, I would say. Whereas on the contrast, you have Anora, which was written and directed and edited by Sean Baker, starring Mikey Madison, Mark Edelstein, Yura Borsov, and I don't know how to say this name, but Karin Karagulian, who has starred in every Sean Baker film. This has a budget of $6 million. Wow, I did not realize. Sorry, this is how great it is. $6 million, and they made this film. That is awesome. And the box office of $12.5 million. Before we go into our theater experience, which film has a higher trajectory?
Oh, for me, it's Anora. I think the word of mouth is massive for this movie because it's marketed extremely well. Neon, we'll get into this later, so I won't spend too much time here. Neon markets their movies very well. And also, when I found out this budget was $6 million, I gasped out loud because I was like, "That makes no sense."
I just did. Yeah, I was so stunned.
Feels massive. Feels absolutely massive.
Yeah,
but yeah, I think to me, it's Anora. Yeah, I would say it's a romantic comedy epic. And I truly believe that. And when you look at the budget, it does not match that. I also want to shout out Sean Baker's writer, director, editing credit. I am so glad you brought that up because when I saw he was the writer, director, editor, I was like, that's my boy right there. That is a man who knows what he wants and he is going to do what it takes to get it.
Mikey Madison has been talking about this on their press tour pretty much every single time she's asked about working with Sean Baker. And she says, there's nobody who knows a vision more than Sean Baker. Like, he knows what he wants. And he's so calm about it because he knows he's literally in the writers, directors, and editors seat. So he's in the development period, he's in the filming period, and he's in the post period. He is the one responsible for piecing this thing together. And to have that skill set in all three of those stages, that is incredibly invaluable. So, theater experience. I want to hear about your Heretic first, and then your Anora theater experience. Let's hear them.
So, Heretic, I went with Cass. We went on Thursday night. And it was a fairly decent sized crowd. I was pretty surprised. I thought there'd be a few people just because, it's Thursday night, it's opening, so it's going to be a big crowd. And it was a little more than I expected. But there during the movie, there were no reactions to anything. Nobody gasped, nobody laughed, nobody said anything. It was very quiet. And I think that sort of speaks to the movie's command over what it's trying to say and
Yeah.
forces you to sit there and contemplate. Because this is a very thinky movie. It wants you to think and just put yourself in these poor sisters' shoes. But after the movie, I will say, walking out, this never happens when I go to the theater. Nobody ever talks after a movie, but for some reason with this and Anora, people were buzzing. Whether it was good or bad, people were
Ooh.
buzzing. And with this, I would say a lot of the reviews I was hearing just from people, because I'm mingling around, and they were very divisive, which I was shocked about. I thought most people would enjoy this, but I heard some people saying that Hugh Grant was silly and not scary at all. And I think that sort of probably comes from them knowing Hugh Grant as rom-com king. And
Yeah.
so I can kind of see that getting in the way of like seeing him as this figure. But also a couple people were saying how intense and scary it was. There are a few people talking about their own missions, which I was shocked about. Like, there's not a huge Mormon population in Maine. So when I was hearing people talk about like they've had creepy encounters on their missions and it reminded them of that. And
Mm.
it was just all over the map. So it was a fun experience. I had a great time. Cass, though, I went with her, and halfway through the movie, she's like, I don't like this. It scared the shit out of her for the first like
Oh,
half.
okay.
The first half, I'd say, she was scared, and then the last half, she was like, "Oh, I don't care anymore." But she was like curled up in a ball in her seat, like all scared. I was like, "This is adorable. I love this." So it was fun to see that reaction from her. What about you? What was your theater experience like?
It was packed. Yeah, I saw this on a Friday night. My brother was in town, and so we went to a theater that was filled with I almost imagine Utah's going to be the best demographic for this because of the Mormon religion, and so
Mm-hmm.
many people have gone on Mormon missions, or they've housed Mormon missionaries, or they've had them over for dinner. Like, there's such an understanding for Mormon missionaries. So the fact that you get a horror film by A24 about two sister missionaries who are essentially, going into an environment that they know nothing about, that entices this state, whether they are Mormon or not. Like, whether you're a Mormon member or you're not a Mormon member, I think those people are going to find themselves at the theater. So it was quiet. I'm not going to lie. When you mentioned, yeah, it wasn't really reactive, it wasn't super engaging, at least in terms of the oohs and the ahs in theater. I felt
Mm-hmm.
the same thing. And I was a little surprised by that because I thought this would be one of those films like, oh, I mean, there were some chuckles when it came to, them mentioning like Utah and them talking about like pornography. Like, they mention like pornography, or they mention it
Yeah.
weird, or they say it weird.
She says
And
pornography.
yeah, and I thought that was a good touch of just like the innocence and the naivety about what it's like to be a Mormon missionary. And they did a really good job. I think in terms of talking about talking about pornography, like, that doesn't happen really as missionaries. You don't just unload to your companion. I'm saying this, by the way, to everybody listening, because I have served a Mormon mission. I did at one point go to Belgium and the Netherlands and knock on doors just like these girls did. So seeing this on screen, the tone was there, the energy behind like just their innocence and their desire to connect with somebody and share a message and have somebody listen. It was buzzing in our theater. It was quiet, but it was buzzing. You could feel this energy. But there was a moment in the film that really got everybody. And, spoiler alert, I guess, to some degree. I'm not going to mention any context around this, but there was a vain scene in this movie, and
Mm-hmm.
everybody, they were like, ooh, like Hugh Grant truly was positioned for this film in the best way possible. I don't know him as a rom-com king. I know he is, but I just didn't grow up watching those films. So when I see him, I'm seeing a little bit more of a sinister look because I have nothing to attach myself to from before this film. So I thought it was a good theater experience. I think it's a fun one. I feel like A24 tends to create fun community settings with the films that they distribute, with the films that they purchase. I thought it was good. In contrast to Anora, which I think had a better theater experience for me. I mean, this was at Fantastic Fest. It was half the audience. It was kind of unique because half the audience was hyped because they have been looking forward to this film since the day it was, marketed, myself included. And then there's another half that was like, yo, we're here for horror films. This is a genre festival. I don't even know
Oh
what Anora
yeah.
is. Like, so it was kind of unique to talk to people and have no recollection of what Anora is or what it's about. Or like some people even said, yeah, I'm not going to go to that. I'm going to go like home and relax and then come back. And to me, I was like, this is the movie I'm dying to see. It's the one that I'm waiting to see. So it was a lively atmosphere. I thought that the humor landed. Everybody, like those moments, everybody started laughing, even as minute as the church scene. And he looks at his phone. You know, the priest looks at his phone. He's like, no. And it's just like a very subtle, like, very good. I thought the theater was, at least here, because I saw it a second time, it was lively for sure, but I think the buzz is not expanding as much as Heretic, because Heretic is a Mormon missionary film. So here, the film was like somewhat packed, or the theater was somewhat packed. And I think the buzz itself, since it hasn't been as loud in Utah, people are getting a little bit surprised. You know, they go in, first scene of the film is just a pan shot in a strip club. You literally have a dolly shot. They're just panning across asses in a strip club. And then the way it ends, it's like if you could take yourself out of any sort of preemptive thought that you have, because we all have it, you're gonna fucking love that. So I thought it was a great theater experience, in contrast to Heretic, which may have been a little bit more buzzy because of my location. What was your Anora experience like?
I am so glad you brought that up, because I did want to ask you if your location had something to do with the way people were going to react to Anora, because Maine is sort of similar, especially where I am at, where it's sort of an older demographic, maybe a little more conservative. So there's certain things that they probably don't want to see in movies or hear in movies. And Anora just punches you right in the fucking face with it the minute it starts. And it does not let up, which I am so thankful for. But my theater experience was packed and it was loud. Anytime anything happened, the theater erupted. Like, it was just the most responsive crowd I have been a part of in this
Really?
state. And it was amazing. There were people coming in after the movie had started, and they were like standing in the back of the theater, like trying to find where to go, because that's how many seats were taken up. Like, people were just struggling to find seats, even because it was packed, and that never happens around here. So that was amazing to see. And then the conversations walking out, Cass and I decided to stick around because we were going to get dinner at a restaurant around that area. So I was like really tuned in listening, and people were loving it. It wasn't as divisive as I thought it was going to be, which is funny because I thought Heretic would be less divisive than it was.
Yep.
But one woman actually walked out. Her husband and her walked out, and they're both older people, probably in their 60s. And she said, "What else has this man done? I really enjoyed that." And he was like, "Oh, he has a movie called Florida Project. I think you'd like that." And so I was like, "Yes, this woman is discovering Sean Baker.
That's
She's in her
awesome.
60s and she's still discovering film and creators and directors." And I was like, "This is wonderful." Almost everybody that I listened to was saying positive things, especially Mikey Madison. Igor, my name on this podcast today is Igor. He was getting a lot of love. People were obsessed with him when we were leaving. So the conversation afterward had me buzzing even more about the movie. And then Cass and I went to a restaurant. We ended up talking about the film for probably an hour, because I was like, I just need to like
Whoa.
bounce things off you. We got to talk. I want to get things out. And what amazed me and surprised me was she was so excited to have this conversation, because she enjoyed it way more than she thought she was going to. So it was a great theater experience and a great post theater experience.
I am getting a hint, and you mentioned this with Cass, and I had a similar experience with Kenzie. I'm getting a hint that people are underestimating how much they're going to like this film. I feel like they're like,
Yes.
it's about a sex worker. Okay, I don't know. Oh, Mikey Madison, I don't know who that is. Mark Edelstein, I don't know who that is. Sean Baker, I don't know who that is. Like, there's a lot of I don't knows, and people, for some reason, and you tell me if you feel different, people feel like they need to know who's in a film to go enjoy the film. Like, if there's somebody they don't know, they're like, I'm not going to like it. It's like, yeah, I get that. Like, I do gravitate to filmmakers that I know, but I'm equally open to filmmakers I don't know. And if I see something from them that's phenomenal, like this, because I have not seen the Florida Project or Tangerine or Red Rocket, so now I'm going to instantly go watch Sean Baker's other films because of how surprised I was. And Kenzie was the same way. We wrapped up the theater. I turned over to her just like everybody typically does. And I'm just like, what are you feeling? You know, like what are your thoughts? And she's like, I love that film. Like, so passionate, just I love that film. So I do want to start our conversation here about both films in this direction. Why did Heretic have a little bit more buzz? Maybe not more, but really solid buzz. and it ended up being a little bit underwhelming, whereas Anora had a lot of buzz and it's really kept it there. Like, do you feel different? Did you enjoy Heretic more than I'm giving it credit for?
No, I'm in the same boat with you, and I truly believe it's the Barbarian effect, except it didn't work
Mm,
out for me as much. I also don't love Barbarian, and in fact, I actually probably like this one more, but the grand populace seems to like Barbarian a lot. So I think it wasn't as advertised, and I think that's why it's a little more buzzy because people are like, you're going in and you're not you're expecting one thing and you're getting another, and I think people for the large part are very surprised and excited by that. I am not, and I think Anora is as advertised. So I think when people go in and see
yeah,
that, they get what they're expecting. So I think the reason Harry also, let's be honest, in the grand scheme of things, the Gen Pop is probably more likely to know what A24 is versus Neon. So they probably just see
true.
the A24 logo and get very excited. And that's not a bad thing or a knock on anybody. But I think that they just don't dig in or really interact or engage with a film like Anora at first because it's Neon. They did Parasite, and that's really all people really remember or know. So I think they probably see the A24 logo and they gravitate towards that. I also think, like you said, the huge Mormon aspect of it. And I'm going to be honest with you, bro. I watched The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives. I did. I
How
broke
was
down.
it?
I couldn't help myself. I was like, Cass, we got to watch this show. I loved it. I'm one for sloppy drama. I love all this tea. Give me the tea all the time. I'm very messy like that. But Mormon culture's never been so at the forefront of our society as it has now. When Mormon Wives dropped on Hulu, it became their number one most watched show of all time. So I mean,
Wow.
this is something that people want to see for whatever reason that is. I don't know, but people want to see it. So when you drop that show and you get this movie, it feels like Mormonism's right at the front of it. And so I think people are really geared towards that. Also, Hugh Grant, he has a name, so people are buzzed about
Yeah.
that. They're like, "Oh, it's Hugh Grant! It's Hugh Grant!" He touches every demographic from our grandparents on down. Everybody knows Hugh Grant, and so I think that's another reason why people were so excited because you said the I don't knows of Anora are probably turning a lot of people away, or at least just not engaging them. And so I think that having Hugh Grant lends this movie some credibility in people's eyes, even if it's not a rom com.
That's a great point. Hugh Grant, I think, is the big selling point here. Hugh Grant tied with the Mormon culture because
Exactly.
maybe
Yes.
it's this, maybe it's the secrecy, the low key element. Like if somebody made a Jehovah's Witness movie, I'd probably be intrigued just because I don't know much about their
Mm-hmm.
religion. So if you make an A24 product that's going to dramatize, that religion into a horror film or a thriller or even a comedy for that matter, I'm going to be interested in seeing that. So I love that you mentioned just the secrecy element. And I say secrecy just because nobody really knows anything about these niche religions. Like people know general concepts with the Catholic Church, people know general concepts with the Muslim religion. Like people know that because they're so big. But when it comes to these really orthodox, tight screwed religions like Jehovah's Witness and Mormonism, we just want to know more. Like we almost want to know, ooh, what goes
Mm-hmm.
on? Like, what is a Mormon mission like? And so I think that really works for the marketing side of Heretic. I think though Hugh Grant, at least on my list, is top of the top in terms of positive things, I think there's one element for Heretic that both hurts it and promotes
Oh.
the film. And I think the fact that the filmmaker takes the audience into consideration, our intelligence, and he does not fuck with our intelligence. He actually respects our intelligence, or I should say both of them, because this is co-directed. That's something I
Mm-hmm.
really admire because it's something that there's an open conversation. And this is where I feel like the film turns different than I imagined. It's really to provoke a conversation, not to scare people to the depths of their core, like a Long Legs or something else. And so when I'm getting this conversation as somebody with a Mormon background, it is so enticing to me. However, slowly but surely, and Ken's and I talked about this, you start to realize that the balance is a little bit off. There's a little too much talking, a little too much just like proselyting, like two missionaries sitting in front of a
Yeah.
potential convert, and they're just having a real conversation. It's like, oh, okay, to some degree I am interested by this, but I don't want this to be 60% of the film. Like I want this to be a hint of the film, and then let's do something with it. Let's get some movement. I just think there was a lack of movement for where we were. I mean, we went into some random guy's house who has a blueberry pie candle. So there's something going on. He keeps tucking himself around the corner, but we don't know what's there. So we're stuck in this living room for a good portion of this film. And I feel like the film starts moving once they leave that living room space, but it takes quite some time. So I think that's where I had a hard time with the separation of Heretic, because it really wanted to tell us something, but it didn't want to show us much. It didn't want us to move around. It didn't want to take us to different spaces. And if it had that balance, I think this would be a little bit more of an enticing film. This would have a notch up in my book. Whereas Anora felt like a well-rounded story. This felt like a well-rounded, I put on here, marital pairing between the music and the visuals and the story. It's all tied together. So when you're watching that opening sequence, panning across this strip club, you're listening to this music that's making you feel while you're watching this extreme slow-mo shot, and you're just already building an emotion toward the film. Whereas in something like Heretic, you don't build emotion until you're provoked to feel emotion, which is when Hugh Grant essentially turns his page from good guy to evil. And that's like 50% into the film. So yeah, I had a hard time with the pacing a little bit.
I actually think it's funny that you bring that up because I just saw a video yesterday or maybe the day before that of Hugh Grant literally saying, he's like, I apologize to Chloe East and Sophie Thatcher because they had to sit there and listen to me recite pages and pages and pages of dialogue at them, multiple takes, multiple angles. He's like, I felt bad for them. And that sort of does, clue in the audience, I think, after you view it or even before you view it, if you saw that before you watched the movie, that this movie is very talky. And I think
Yes,
that's one
very
reason
talky.
Hugh Grant is the top of my list for positive reviews about or positive things about this movie. This is his movie. He is the driving force of this movie. He's perfect casting because as a person, we know he's a bit snide and a bit slimy and rude. This is a known thing about him. And so putting him in this position, in this character, I think is perfect casting because there's something sinister and a little offbeat about the man himself. But then you put him in a situation like this and you're like, oh, he fits it just perfectly. But I think the reason this movie is it tackles something so heavy and so intense and so ingrained in our society, and that's religion.
Mm.
But it does it in a way that is not hereditary, which also tackles some like a cult aspect of
Yeah.
religion. It does it in a way where it talks at you and it wants you to sit with it. And so because you're listening to this man talk so long, it works to scare you a little bit and unnerve you. I would say more than scare you, it unnerves you because it's like, where are we going with this? Something's not quite right. And then, like you said, he flips that switch and you're like, there it is. We get it. But at the same time, it also can bore you maybe a little bit because you're like, oh my God, theology. We're going on and on and on and on. And if you're not into that, I mean, you're just probably not going to love it unless you are, super into it for some reason. So it's easy to see how this movie could alienate you, but it's funny that it's the thing that alienates people the most also is the thing that brings people to the movie itself. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it, because that's what I'm feeling with Heretic. The things that work are also the things that don't work. And so it's like you
Exactly.
can't really have one without the other. However, if you want the other, you're going to take away one. It's like it's really a puzzle piece of the filmmakers essentially saying, "Hey, we know that this religion is untouched, it's untapped, it's not really dug into, and let's talk about it. Let's talk about why this religion is so secretive or why it's not." Also, apologies, you might hear some groundwork over here, but um where I thought about Hugh Grant and this scenario, and we both put something on our list that were pretty similar in terms of like a negative side of what's going on, and that's the fact that I just wanted more of a like, give us a day in the life. If
Yes.
Mormonism is the curiosity, we can't just sit with these girls on a park bench and get to know what they feel, get to know their naive, I guess their naive energy that they have, their innocent energy. We get a little bit, and it was a really good intro. I actually liked the way that they had that conversation, the pornography conversation. But I just think we need more, and especially as a past missionary, there's so much in a day of a missionary's life that would be enticing to use as a draw up to what's going to happen later. And by enticing, I mean, look, they go through rigorous agendas of 6 a.m. you wake up, 7 a.m. you have breakfast, 8 to 11 you have studies. So 8 to 9 you have personal studies, 9 to 10 you have companion studies, 10 to 11 you have language studies. And then you go out and you proselyte, quote unquote, where you knock doors and talk to people until 9:30 at night with
Oh
meals
my
in
God.
between and whatnot. But you have that. So it's like, show us that. Like, show us that portion, and then show us how rigorous it is to get an appointment, so that when they do get an appointment with Hugh Grant, it's like, oh, thank God. Like they do, like, it's a relief for them, because we don't really get that. It's almost like, oh, we're going to go visit this person's house because there's like a soft appointment. And he's like, oh yeah, come on in. It's almost like too perfect. And as somebody who knows the missionary lifestyle, that just doesn't happen. The amount of people who are telling you no before somebody's like, oh yeah, come on in, I want to talk to you. It would have made the contrast a little bit better. I just think the story needed to feel a little fuller, and it didn't. It felt a little bit half explored.
Mhm.
The barbarian sequence, for some weird reason, I like this twist, but it doesn't feel, I don't know, it feels fitting but lackluster, maybe. Like, what did you think about the twist in Heretic? And spoiler, by the way, if we do announce anything about this twist, but what, yeah, did it hit you right? Would you want to, like, I'm trying to even remember. I've kind of forgotten this twist a little bit.
Um, I'm realizing I put all my notes in the wrong section. I'm so sorry. But yeah, so I would say just when they get into the basement, spoilers fully ahead. Are you referencing for the twist when they go into the basement and this becomes some sort of like Dante's Inferno weird
Yeah, and they
like
see
miracle
potentially
thing?
other sister missionaries maybe in cages, or
Yeah.
other, they at least see other females in cages in the basement.
So I actually think this movie loses steam once it heads to the basement. That's where it kind of like drops out for me. Once we get to that back room, I'm still invested. But then we go at, because it's a very grounded movie. Like there's nothing really out of the ordinary or super unnatural. It's a little alarming, obviously, and concerning,
Yeah.
but there's nothing that's like downright, okay, we're going in this direction, like we're going into this very like otherworldly direction. And then you go into the basement, and then you're told there's a prophet down there, and it just becomes so ungrounded that I start to like I start to lose myself a little bit, because I just think the movie loses itself. And so I think it loses steam as we get further on. But I do think that those first two segments, the living room to the little church area that he's built, are
Oh yeah, yeah.
fantastic. Yeah, I think those are fantastic. But I think that what bothers me the most is there's not like a real deep connection to these characters. We're not really sinking our teeth into like who they are as people, really. We get little pieces through dialogue, but again, this is mostly Hugh Grant talking at them. And
Yep.
so my issue with that is that we don't get a lot of these background traits of who these women are. Let me know who these sisters are, give me some background on them. That opening conversation, like you said, fantastic. You learn so much about them just from that, like Chloe East's character being really naive and a bit childish, and then Sophie Thatcher's character being a little more aggressive in terms of knowing herself potentially and
Yes.
standing up for herself. I would have loved if they tried to do this a little bit, where they were walking around town and they were having conversations and they were stopping to talk to people. But I would have loved to see, like you said, the stress of doing that and then getting an appointment with someone. Let me see that. I agree, because I just have no background with these guys. It's a, 50, it's like maybe not even 15. It's like probably 10-minute sequence of them walking around, and then they just go to Hugh Grant's house, and then it's from there on it's Hugh Grant's movie. I want to know more. I want to see more about who these characters are, who these people are, and how they interact with their own religion, because I think that definitely helps with how Hugh Grant goes on that Monopoly rant and how it's
Yep.
affecting these girls. I think knowing these girls a little more intimately would have made that scene a little more intense.
Absolutely. Yeah, and you see them walk, and they try to do the whole like, hey, like, we're sisters with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Like, they try to talk to people, but not really, and I think if you had an entire section on different locations that they're trying to stop and talk to people, an entire section on door knocking, an entire section of them learning, like, you can spend 20 minutes with these girls going through their life as a missionary,
Mm-hmm.
because then the one thing that hooked me so hard is when they meet Hugh Grant, they're talking, and I believe this is right after the twist happens, where they essentially know now that they are not in a safe space. He says,
Right.
I have found true religion. I have found it. And in my mind, I was like, ooh, I'm intrigued now. What are you going to show me? Because this is obviously somebody who's intelligent, who has dug into religion, who has dug in all the teachings of different churches, and he proclaims it. He shows it, and he shows it in a very explainable way that's hard to refute. It's hard to fight against.
Mhm.
But then his version of true religion is almost like, hey, I have a prophet downstairs. Hey, there's this thing. And it almost gets a little muddled between like, oh, you're still trying to make this relatable to the Mormon religion to some degree. Like, we don't need to insert a prophet. Why don't you just say, I found true religion? It's downstairs. Go look for yourself. And then they go downstairs and they see this horrific situation. I just don't think you really
Yeah.
need to tie it to, oh, this is a prophet. And then we have to figure out, wait, is something supernatural going on or is there not going on? Are they disguising something? Are they hiding it? Are we being misled? At least those
Mhm.
were the thoughts going through my head. I was thinking too much. And I kind of wanted to just sit and enjoy this rather than think and think and think and try to piece everything together. Because then for me, that really dilutes and mitigates the thrilling aspect of this. To your point, that just dies as the
Yeah.
movie gets more intense and you actually see more insane things in this house. It gets less and less thrilling, and I think that's ultimately like a bad move for a movie of this caliber that is meant to kind of scare you in a way that's unsettling, not necessarily horror, but a little bit more psychological. So I think there's a good message. I think there's a good intelligence with the movie. I just don't think it's really cinematic all the way through. It doesn't stick with me.
Yes.
It wasn't really like fulfilling when I walked out of the theater. It was intriguing and interesting, and it's one that I enjoy having conversations with people about. But it's not one that I'm dying to go see again because I missed some element that I need to fill in the gaps.
No, I completely agree. It's just it sort of loses itself because it's taking I don't know how to describe it. It just takes Hugh Grant and it makes him like I think they're trying too hard to confuse the audience and be
Yeah.
like, okay, what do you think's happening, audience? It tries way too hard to put it on us rather than just have us experience it with them. And also, I gotta tell you, I think that some of these character assumptions and leaps in that last half really are a huge reason why I lose steam, why I lose interest in this movie,
Mm.
because all of a sudden, Hugh Grant's backpedaling. Now he's saying it's uh, we're all in a virtual reality program. That's the true religion. And then the sister Paxton, I think, or I can't remember. I think Chloe East's character, she's like, "Oh no, there's a trap door in here somewhere, and you swapped out the women, and there's multiple women." It was just like the character assumptions and the leaps they take and the steps they take to get there. The longer the movie goes, the less realistic they are. I feel because in
Yes.
the
It's a
beginning
little too much.
they're really uncomfortable in the beginning, and they're like, "Is this guy creepy? He's trying to do something to us? Is his wife really home?" I like that. Feels real, feels grounded.
Yes.
But then they're downstairs and they're like, is he the Messiah? Is there a prophet? And then they're like, no, it can't be. There has to be a woman in a trapdoor somewhere. And it's like, you've lost me because you were grounded in such great debate and conversation. And then when you get to this like mystical part, and then all of a sudden he's got 9 layers to his house. And I'm like, after at a certain point, you start to lose me. And it's the barbarian aspect where it's like you're doing way too much to be extra. You're just doing so much to be extra. It's just so unnecessary. And so I think that's a huge knock in my book. But I do want to say something positive just because I feel like I've harped on it a lot. And there were some great things about this movie that weren't
For
just Hugh
sure.
Grant. I think on the side of the filmmaking, I was geeking out over the cinematography and the way the framing of Hugh Grant's character was. The angles they use on this man, the close up shots they get of this man are so sinister and uncomfortable. And you're like, he's having completely normal conversation. He's being charming, he's being witty, but the angles are sinister and there's something tilted and off about them. And you're like, why are they framing him like this? And then as the movie goes on, you start getting a little more unnerved and a little more scared and a little more tense. And the camera angles are getting more intense and they're zooming in so tight. And then Hugh Grant ultimately flips that switch. And I just think the way they use the camera, the directors who use the camera is fantastic in creating atmosphere. And this is how you make something intense and a little scary without using jump scares. There are no jump scares in this movie. There might be one, I guess you could consider, but it's all in how they shot the film. And that's where all
Yeah.
the intensity and horror comes from. So loved the way they shot Hugh Grant and the way they used the camera.
What a great sentiment. I feel like that's what A24 almost gravitates more. I mean, A24 typically finds films that have kind of this raw message. I won't even say grounded, just raw. And it can be raw comedy, it can be raw thrill, it can be raw drama, just like a raw message, a concept. And then they really try to mask it, and they mask it with incredible visuals, which is seen on full display with this film, like you mentioned. I think the film acts as a great concept. I don't think the concept is really fleshed out because, look, Hugh Grant, phenomenal in this film. I think the both female actors are really good in this film. Both of them also having some sort of Utah background, so I think they have an understanding to this religion, and so they understand how to portray. And that was a really positive note for me, is making it believable with the tone at which they're coming across. Because as a missionary, you can really stage this. This is why I think the Book of Mormon play is one of the most hilarious plays I've ever seen, because they own it fully rather than trying to oversell me on some sort of mannerism that these individuals are taking while leaving their families for 18 months or 24 months at a time. So it's suspenseful, it's ambiguous. There's a confusion there that I like throughout the movie. And that all comes from the dialogue. I just think maybe mitigate the dialogue a little bit, have a different direction, point us in a different direction. I felt, there's just like a weird, like, I don't know, a weird expression with this film that I don't really know what to put words to, but it felt less than what I was hoping, which does not make it bad. It was just a little less than what I anticipated. And so once again, that could be props to the marketing for getting me intrigued. That could be, the people who saw it at Fantastic Fest when I did not see it, and they were raving. I mean, people in the creator circle were like, this is the best horror film of the year. Hugh Grant has never been better. And, I feed into that. I feed into energy when other filmmakers or creators are really excited about something like Anora. I tend to feel inclined to also be like, ooh, I want to see this. I want to talk about it. I want to have a conversation. So when I get something that's not really in that direction, not really as fulfilling, it feels a little bit less so. Anora, should we transition? Should we transition
Let's
to
do
Anora? Look, I have literally one negative thing about this film. That's why I put it a 4.5 out of 5.
it.
I love this
Let's
film
start
so much.
there.
I think it's a top 3 film of the year. I think this, there's like one little tiny bit of pacing in this film, and I think that's in the search segment, I call it. I believe it's the second act leading into the third act, which is when they're, once again, spoilers for both films, but this is when Mikey Madison, her character, and the other characters who are kind of like the chaperones or bodyguards, or at least like people who are responsible for Mark Edelstein's character, they're on a hunt to find him because he ran away. He ran away, and he's pretty much getting shit-faced this entire time. In the search segment, though, we get a lot of insight into the mannerisms and the gentleman mannerisms of Igor, we also just don't get much new grounding on Mikey Madison's character. We know who she is up to this point because they did a phenomenal buildup of her character. But I just felt like that could have been trimmed a little bit. We could move on from that moment because that dragged on a little bit more. However, take that out, I just think this movie is too good to be bad because, I mean, look, the marital pairing, like I mentioned, of music, visuals, and story, the level of emotion provoked through the exhilaration of heartbreak. You got to think about that. You have a trajectory of hype, 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 hype. Oh my God, this is happening. Oh my God, I worked so hard. Oh my God, I deserve this. To, are you fucking kidding me? This is what I get from this? Like, this is the reward I'm getting for thinking that I had something good. Mikey Madison, Mark Edelstein, and truly the entire cast. And I mean the entire cast. I don't care if you know their names. I don't care if you've seen them in films before. They were so good in this movie, and that added to everything. So I have too many good things to say about this film because I think it, and what I mean by saying that is it wraps up an emotion that I can walk away from the theater saying, I need to talk about this film. I have so much I'm feeling. I need to talk about this, whether that's with friends, whether that's with somebody I just watched it with. Whereas in contrast, Heretic was more of a, I want to know what you think, and then let's move on because I don't really have much to add to. So it's quite a contrast. Obviously, one is made by A24 and one's made by Neon. I don't think they're responsible for the quality of these films. I think Sean Baker is responsible for the quality of Anora. But what are your thoughts on Anora, man?
I'm so glad you brought 2 points up here. The first one being the search segment. Let's call it that because that's exactly what it is. It's my favorite part in the whole movie because, and you said you didn't like it because of the pacing and and just sort of dragged. And I do agree that it feels a bit long-winded, but I love the chaos that Sean Baker creates because we are so in Anora's head. We are so like, what the fuck is going on? Someone explain something to us. And Sean
Yeah.
Baker refuses to allow that to happen. He refuses to allow you to get comfortable. Everything is so quick and so intense. And so that whole segment, I was dying laughing because not only is it absolutely hilarious, but I
It's
was
very
also like
funny.
on the edge of my seat in the same way that I was when I watched Uncut Gems because I was like, what is going on? Like someone take the time to like cue me in. So I felt very in Mikey Madison's shoes, especially because she doesn't really know um Ivana all that much. She doesn't know too much about who he is personally. It's just, she likes to have fun with him. She loves him because he's fun and likes her. Um, so I actually really like that part of the movie. I can understand it's a bit long-winded, but I think it's also very revealing to who each of these characters are. That's when I start to think we get a little bit more insight into these characters because like you said you felt you knew who Anora was up to that point. I had a hard time connecting with Anora because I feel
Mm.
like I didn't get enough of her history. It's very brief, and that might be done on purpose because she doesn't want to explain her past. She just wants to move beyond it and be with Ivana. I don't know. I had a hard time connecting to her in those moments, and so I felt not having a lot of history didn't allow me to sink my teeth into her until we get into that second part of the movie where they are doing the search and you find out she is this very strong-willed woman who will not back down. She will not stop fighting. And I think she truly loves Ivana more than just for his money. Even if she is saying, I want to get paid for this, I want to get paid for that. I think she truly cared about this man because she thought this man cared about her. And then you start to see the Igor side of things. And you just really, you connect with these characters so much more in that second act. And that's why that second act is my favorite because the whole first 45 minutes, I was like, I don't know these people. So I have a hard
Mm.
time caring what's going on. They're just running around and doing crazy things. But then that second act, I'm like, okay, I know Ivana is kind of a punk ass bitch because he ran away and left his woman in the house. I know that Mikey Madison's character, Anora, is incredibly strong willed. She will never stop fighting. She cares for what she cares for and she stands up for it. We start to see Igor. You think he's this brute, but you also get this soft side of him, even at the beginning when he's like, doesn't really know what he's doing there. You know what I mean? I think you really start to see who these characters are, including the Godfather, the caretaker, whose name I cannot remember, of Ivana. You see, he's more worried about his own ass than he is Ivana, and you
Yeah.
start to realize who Ivana is as a person because he's sort of relaying all this background information. So I think that second act is the most pivotal act of the whole movie. Although I will agree, the bouncing around from like this restaurant to this restaurant to this store to this club to this club to this restaurant, it can get a bit cumbersome and a bit repetitive. But I think that is so important because we don't get any character building in that first act, in my opinion. Not enough to like satiate me. Whereas in that second
Mm.
act we do. But I also want to say that I agree with you 100% on this is not the positive things I have to say are not because Neon did anything with this movie. It is because Sean Baker, and I have written down in my notes, Sean Baker, he is the MVP of this movie. He clearly had a vision when he wrote this script. He clearly had a vision when he was directing, and he clearly had a vision when he was editing. And I love seeing that. And I want to see more studios and more companies like big studios, big companies give their writers, their directors, their editors just sort of the reins. Let them take over. Let them make the movie that they are trying to make. So when you
Yep.
get a Sean Baker and he wants a larger scale budget, which he has openly said he does not want a larger scale budget because I think it creates too many shortcuts for him. But if he were to have a higher budget movie and he could get a little more intense with these things, let him make the movie the way he wants to make it. And Anora is the perfect example of this is his movie. This is this man's movie. As much as Mikey Madison puts her whole life in this thing, I think Sean Baker is the lifeblood of it because he had such a clear vision of what he wanted. So I echo your sentiments with that. Even if we disagree on the character building in the second act, we can completely agree that regardless, Sean Baker is the king of all kings because of this movie.
Yeah, and I hope he gets his flowers. I hope he gets his praise
Yes.
because I've only heard good things about his other projects, but I don't think he's really been recognized for those projects in the way people are talking about Anora. I mean, it won the Grand Jury Award, I believe, or the
The Palme d'Or.
The Palme d'Or, which Neon, to my understanding, has won like the last six.
Yeah,
So
it's like
is it
five or
five?
seven. It's either five or
Yeah.
seven of the last like Palme d'Ors.
So honestly, this is why I really look at Neon in a version of what are you like what are you buying? What movies are you actually purchasing and distributing? Because I know whoever your buyers are, whoever's watching the movies, they are more invested in the quality of filmmaking than they are the marketability of an actor or a
Mhm.
filmmaker, and they just want to like put that up there. I feel like they know what stories are going to gravitate to audiences. And look, they've proven that 5 to 7 times over the last, 5 to 7 years. One thing I really like about this film that isn't getting as much attention, even though that is the entire point of the film, is this opportunity to understand sex workers, this opportunity to
Yes.
understand the emotion and the just how much energy it takes to really try to figure out human emotion. And that's what I really like the intro scene is it's showing Mikey Madison, who is very good at her job, knowing what gets people to tick a little bit, knowing what gets people to react, knowing what type of conversation or what type of tone in her voice she needs to use to work and to work successfully. But then you easily see the contrast where she's laying in her bed because she worked all night and her sleep schedule's all fucked up. And her roommate's like, "Did you grab the milk?" And she's like, "Does it look like there's milk?" Like you get to see this really raw footage of somebody who's trying to figure out how to use her skill set that she's worked really hard at to mix that with understanding human emotion to have a bigger payout than this paycheck to paycheck, no sleep overnight, weird sleep schedule, weird, coworkers. Some of them are awesome, some of them are shitty. And then you have her meet Mark Edelstein's character, who's kind of opening the gates, who's essentially
Yeah.
saying, look, this is the moment in time. This is the law of attraction moment that you have been working for. And now the tides are turning. He pays her 15 grand for a week, where he says, I would have done it for 30. And she says, I would have done it for 10. And I love that pretty woman moment where you just show that's where we start believing, oh, Mark Edelstein's character and Mikey Madison's character, they do care about each other. They like each other. They, dare I say, they love each other. And to go along that path and to show us, oh, okay, she deserves this, like she seems cool. She's been working hard. And then to have that flip on its face and to show what she does with it because she fully anticipated a way out and now she doesn't have a way out. That to me is like true heartbreak because you have somebody who's just trying to make it, just trying to work hard and make a living with a skill set that she has developed, and you get put on your face at the end. I mean, what a
Yeah.
phenomenal conclusion that I imagine many people are walking out a little confused by. They're probably walking out like, whoa, this is the ending I'm getting after this exhilarating ride I just had. And to me, I see exactly where Sean Baker's seeing this film. He's saying, look, we're not life is not about happy endings. It's about taking chances. And if you take chances, then things happen. Good things happen, bad things happen. If you stand up for yourself, good things happen, bad things happen. And I think there was a good contrast with the way she felt with her confidence that she developed with Yvonne, with Mark Eidelstein's character, in comparison to his mom and how she felt powerless. She had nothing. She couldn't do anything. And so to see her go through this roller coaster of control and not having control, to finally just let it out. And the most pinnacle moment of the entire film, which is at the end with Igor in the car, just wailing and bawling, finally feeling her emotions and finally giving in. I mean, this is a masterpiece, man. This is a true masterpiece of storytelling because of the character arc that's being displayed.
I also want to touch on something you have mentioned, and that's the sex worker aspect. I love that we're getting that and that we're getting nudity in that. And I'm not a guy who sits here and he's like, yeah, give me the nudity. I'm a guy who loves reality, and I love when things reflect what is really going on. And one thing I love about this is that Sean Baker is not shy. None of these performers are shy in portraying these characters truthfully and
Yeah.
honestly. And in that goes, and going hand in hand with that is the fact that there's bound to be nudity in this film, and it does not relent. It does not give up. These are two early 20-year-old kids who are in love with each other, have infinite money at their disposal. They're going to do drugs. They're going to have sex a bunch, and they're going to do these crazy things. And really sticking with that and holding on to these shots that could be awkward, or in other movies, a studio movie per se, you would get fully clothed scenarios, or they'd cut away, or the camera would pan away. I love that Sean Baker was like, no, this is reality. This is what is going on with these
Mm.
characters. So let's sit with that. And I think in a way, I love that this is sort of the exact response that we needed from Oppenheimer. I'm not saying on Oppenheimer was a bad movie. I loved it. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. Fantastic movie. But I think that with the Oppenheimer Oscar, we got this very dry, grounded film that was based on reality. And I think one thing I love about Anora is that it's sort of in that same vein where it's grounded, but it's also like, let's have fun. Because I think one thing
Yes.
we can all agree on with Oppenheimer is it is not fun. You're watching a tragedy unfold. You're watching the lives of the every single person on this planet change forever, because we are creating a weapon of mass destruction that could ultimately end everything that we know. And so what I love about this movie is it is so like, look at this sex worker, look at her life. She got what she wanted. Oh no, it didn't turn out to be exactly what she wanted. I love that. And it's exactly what we needed in response to Oppenheimer. It's sort of a more, you can look at it as not lighthearted, but for most of the movie, it's fairly lighthearted. And then obviously you get into that final act with Igor, which is not lighthearted in any way. It's very emotional, very meaningful. And I do want to ask you, I had a conversation with Cass on the end and how we both read that. And one thing I love about film is that you can read any scene, any shot in any movie and have your own
Absolutely.
interpretation of that. And once Sean Baker has gone on to say exactly what he thinks the last scene is, but once you release art to the public, you are no longer in control of how it is perceived. And so I am curious how you perceived the ending and what you made of that final moment where she is pounding on Igor and then ultimately breaks down and cries in his arms. I want to know how you read that, because Cass and I read it in two different but somewhat similar ways.
Yeah, what a phenomenal question, because I think this is the fitting sequence to talk about. Like, this is the one, though I think there's a design and a craft with everything in between, not to mention how appealing the sets were. I mean, the clubs and the beach and the Vegas hotel, like everything was so appealing in this film visually. But yeah, that final moment, I thought this was a heart-wrenching arc that nobody expected. I thought this was
Mhm.
the arc, like, I think everybody expected right at the plane where she's like, I'm not getting on the plane. I'm going to get my lawyer. I think that's where everybody's like, oh, yes, yes, this is
Dude,
exactly where we wanted to go. Yes, 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 yes.
my
And
audience cheered. Everybody in my audience, when she said that, they were whooping. They were like, "Yeah!" One guy was like standing up. I mean, it mattered. This moment
whoa.
mattered. I even was sucked into the moment, and I was like, "Let's go!" Like I was like so hyped,
Yes,
and then it doesn't happen.
absolutely. And then it doesn't happen. And I think that right there, first of all, massive credit to Sean Baker, because I think that would be the traditional way to go about ending this film.
Absolutely.
And I think he instead said, hey, I'm more invested in the arc of this character for years after this moment than I am about her arc in this moment. And I think that's a really hard thing to push into, because now I'm at least taking into consideration she went through a stage of having everything she ever needed and wanted, and she was on top of the world financially, to having nothing. She even lost her job. I mean, she probably can go back, I assume, but she doesn't have a job at this point, and she lost pretty much all financial security. And not to mention, the person she may or may not have been infatuated by was a piece of shit, and he's a kid and he's a teenager and he didn't know what he was doing. So I took the ending as an opportunity for her to finally let go of this control that she had to have the entire film. She had to be on top the entire film, to finally say, I don't know what the fuck is going on in my life. I don't know what to feel. I don't know how I am. I don't know who I am. To finally just go. And I love, this is so small, but I love that she started that scene with connecting physically with Igor. Like, that was her go-to. She was like, oh, well, I know that this is a way for me to get things, because I know how to read people. I know how to read men. And the entire
Mm-hmm.
time she's trying to read Igor throughout this film, he's giving her the opposite. Even that phenomenal sequence in the house where it's just the two of them, and she's like, you would have raped me. He's like,
Yeah.
why would I have raped you? I'm not a rapist. And she's like, why wouldn't you have raped me? It was such a unique twist of, wait, what? Like, what's going on?
Yep.
She has read enough male individuals. She's seen enough male individuals in her line of work to have this arc of, oh my God, like I've been thinking this is one way, and in reality there's no one way, there's no one route, there's no one opportunity to live this life. There's also no one route for male individuals or female individuals. I don't know who I am or what other people are looking for, even though this entire time I thought I had it figured out. So I thought it was a let go of control, a release of that control, and an opportunity for herself to feel the emotion she's actually feeling rather than the ones she fabricated for the entire film. What about you?
Bro, I mean, you pretty much, I would say the exact same thing. For me, it is a lot of like that whole first act is her controlling every single situation. One guy literally says, "I can't afford to get a lap dance," and she goes, "Well, come on, sweetheart, let's go to the ATM. What do you mean you can't afford it? Let's go look." Like, she is so sweet and endearing when she needs to turn it on. She knows the exact right things to
Yep.
say. She is in control of these situations always. Then you get the second act, the searching act that we'll call it, and she has no control whatsoever. She is lost completely. She is screaming constantly, "Someone tell me what the fuck is going on," and nobody is telling her what's happening. They just keep telling her to shut up, be quiet, sit down, enough. And so I think that final act, that final scene, I'm glad you brought up the part where she asks him, like, "Why wouldn't you have raped me?" And I think he's like, "Because I'm not a rapist." And I think that's because she's now getting someone looking at her like a person and not a
Yes.
transaction, not a potential just
Ooh,
like
yep.
someone to spend money on for the night. You know what I mean? And so it kind of does. She doesn't know what to do. So she makes a flippant comment. I won't repeat here, but she makes a flippant comment because the defenses go up and she's like, "Nope, nope, don't know what to do with that. So I'm just not doing anything with it." And then when Igor offers the ring back, I think she goes to be physical because it's the one thing she has, the one thing she can give back in return. And she is so used to being, well, I'm given X, I need to return Y. So she's given
Mm,
something, I need to return with my body. I need to return with sex. And so she doesn't know how to just say thank you or interact with someone on a person to person level because she's so on that mode of, well, I know what he wants. He wants to have sex with me, so let's just do that. And then I think what's so poignant is Igor goes to kiss her and she starts ramming on him and he lets go and he's just like, do what you need to do, take it out on me, whatever. And then she sees that and she starts breaking down crying. And ultimately I think she breaks down to cry because she for the first time is realizing that, one, she isn't always going to be in control of these situations, but two, she has found at least one person who views her as a person, is letting her have her emotions, is not telling her to shut the fuck up and do this
mm,
thing for me. He's like, do what you need to do, let it out. And that's why ultimately I think she breaks down and cries, is because for the first time she's sort of free, and maybe she feels that in that moment, and so she's free to maybe engage with people on a personal level instead of just sort of a transactional, unfortunately I'm a sex worker, I'm a prostitute who has to do this for my job security. You know what I mean? She's doing this because she doesn't know what else to do, and Igor's sort of letting her find that space for even a moment in time to do what she feels is necessary. And in that moment in time, it's to get mad, get angry. And I truly believe in my heart of hearts that in that moment, it might not be with Igor, but she has found a way to sort of love herself and
yeah.
understand what love can be. And it's not material things, it's not being thrown money. And maybe this is how she sort of read Yvonne's love, was that it was all money and it was all luxury. But with Igor, it's just being there. It's just letting her have space to do the things she wants to do. Like when she goes upstairs and she gets in bed, I fully think when she woke up, she expected Igor to be there in the bedroom with her, and he wasn't. And I think to her that's more of like another thing that's just like, he has respect for me as a person, as a human being.
Yes.
And so I read that moment like that. Ultimately Cass was in line with us, but she felt a little differently about the transactionary thing. But yeah, no, I think wholeheartedly that it's all about control. This whole movie, a lot like Heretic, it's funny we bring that up, this whole movie is about control and letting go of control, and he who has control has all the power. And so I think that final scene where she just breaks down and cries is so poignant. It's the best scene in the whole movie, and it might be ambiguous to a lot of people, but I think it's really, really poignant in that it is saying like she's gonna be okay, she's gonna be fine, and in my heart, that's what I believe anyway.
Yeah, yeah, and you see the little breadcrumbs throughout the movie when Igor's trying to offer the scarf. She's
Yeah.
taking every bit as a transaction. I think you made such a great point here between human relationship and transaction relationship. And for her, she's only really ever seen from a male counterpart a transaction relationship.
Hmm.
Even with her boss, it's a transaction relationship. Everything is a transaction relationship. So when Igor's trying to be kind to her or trying to offer her help or trying to apologize or anything. She's immediately going into defense mode because she knows that in a transaction relationship, that's what she can do. She can say, no, like, you're a piece of shit. You're dirty. You're gross. Like, get out of here. When in reality, he's trying to be the version that we see the entire film that's amplified in the final moment, which is, I took this ring, which was not given to me, by the way. I took this ring to give to you because you've gone through so much and you didn't even ask
Yes.
me to. And I think having something without being asked for it, without asking for anything in return, he's not saying, hey, here's a ring, now I want to have sex. None of that. It was just more so an idea or an action of simple human decency
Yes.
that she was not ready for. She did not understand what this was because everything Mark Edelstein's character did, Yvonne, was met with a transaction. Everything he did for her, great luxury, going to Vegas, being her, getting engaged. There was some sort of transaction or some sort of expectation to come with it. Whereas with Igor, it was simple human decency. And I fucking love that contrast so much. So much.
Decency is the key word here.
Decency is the key word. Anything else that we left out here before we get into our final thoughts on Heretic and Anora?
No, I'm ready, dude. Let's get into the final thoughts.
All right. What did you rank Heretic? 1 out of 5. What was your ranking, and any final thoughts on that film?
I gave it a 3. I think the performances are the backbone of the movie. This is a very dialogue heavy movie that starts tense, but does seem to devolve and sort of crush under its own weight. And that's because these concepts might be a little too large towards the end. But ultimately, I think it's a movie worth watching. I think anyone who has any interest in organized religion needs to watch this film because I think it is so poignant in Mormonism is obviously the main focus, but he brings up almost every major religion you can think of.
Yeah.
And so I think this is something that you should definitely watch if you have any sort of interest in that or you're questioning anything. Definitely check this out. I also think that this is 100% Hugh Grant's movie. And to be honest, if the Academy was in their right mind, he might make a short list. I don't think he'd be nominated, but we'd see his name at the very least, like mentioned in contention here because he makes this movie what it is and he is stellar.
Did you see that Longlegs has submitted for Oscar consideration?
Oh, I made a whole video about like other movies that should be nominated for other horror movies that should have been nominated because I saw they're launching for like 7 or 8 categories that they want to be put in. And if I had to pick one male actor from a horror movie this year to be nominated, it would be Hugh Grant. It would not be Nicolas Cage, unfortunately, who's one of my favorite actors, but it'd be Hugh Grant.
I agree with that. I agree. I think Hugh Grant gives us more than Nicolas Cage. Nicolas Cage does a great character performance, whereas Hugh Grant runs this film. He is leading this film. I also gave this a 3 out of 5. It's different than what the trailer may lead you to believe, but I put here, isn't that the point of the film anyways? Like to be misled, to go in a direction that you think you're going, but you actually don't end up going. Once again, the barbarian effect, it's kind of going one way, but then ending up in a different direction. So I thought it was fine. I thought it was enjoyable. It was thought-provoking. It was something that was really made for people who know about the Mormon religion, which was kind of unique. I thought it would be more generalized, which it does get to. It does get to a point where he's generalizing religion as a whole, but he digs into such lore or culture within the Mormon church that only really people in Mormonism. I guess before we wrap up our thoughts here, did you know like a bunch of things about Joseph Smith and how he had sex with 14 and 16-year-olds and how those circumstances came to be?
I knew what South Park had taught me, and I have not seen the Book of Mormon, but I've watched so many videos about it that like I get the gist. I did know about the Joseph Mormon thing. I know about the tablets and how he was the only one who could read them. I knew about the magical undergarments. I don't know if that's what they're called, but like the things they wear under their clothes. I knew about that. I will admit that Secret Lives of Mormon Moms or whatever it is, it had taught me a lot more than this movie did.
Yeah, there are, we'll call them the magical undergarments just for this episode. There are those in the religion. Yes, the magical protection undergarments. But yeah, no, okay. So it was, I guess, somewhat marketable. And I say marketable just in sense that whatever they said with Joseph Smith may have been mentioned in South Park. It may have been mentioned in the Book of Mormon play. And I totally forgot that those things were very relevant at the time that they came out, even the Book of Mormon today. So yeah, 3 on Heretic. I gave Anora a 4.5. I think this is a top 3 film of 2024. It's wonderful to be moved by performances that you don't anticipate loving as much as you do after the credits begin to roll. Mikey Madison, first and foremost. This is somebody who was in a B, C, even D list role with Once Upon
Mm-hmm.
a Time in Hollywood, smashed it. Scream, smashed it. And now she's really making her mark at saying, I can lead a film and I can do it full heartedly. I can put everything of myself into this role, which from what I read, she did from day one. And so to have something like that, and then Mark Edelstein, which this may or may not be his first English film, like his first American film. I have to look through, but as I was going through his filmography, nothing was in English. So I was like, this might be the first one. I'm not quite sure. And he was incredible. He was kind of giving us that charisma that everybody talked about in relationship to Timothée Chalamet, but in a different version, very different, but a
Mm-hmm.
similar charisma. I just think everybody should go out to the theater to see this. Don't let the anticipation of nudity prevent you from enjoying a film that has so much more to say than showing you nudity. Like, it has so
Yeah.
much more to say. So yeah, wonderful film.
It's all, let's just say the nudity is all meaningful. It's played
Yes.
to enhance the story. It's not just graphic nudity for the sake of nudity. But I am in the same boat. This is a 4.5 from me. This is in my top 10. I think it might be number 6 on my list. I'd have to look at it, but it's somewhere in there. It's definitely top 10, maybe even top 5. Um, Everybody delivers absolutely grounded and wonderful performances, even if they are chaotic. But all of that just enhances the experience that you're getting. It is as hilarious as it is nuanced and meaningful. And like you said, this is Mikey Madison's like debut, her welcome to the show party, and it is a career defining moment. And I am,
Mm.
one, very excited to see where she goes from here, but two, very nervous because I want her to be able to top this so she can have a long, long, long career at the top.
Yeah, and that's the hard thing, right? When you work with somebody like Sean Baker, it's the same thing that Paul Mescal said about I'm forgetting her name, who made his Oscar nominated film After Sun. I don't know her name, but he's like, yeah, I want to work with that filmmaker for the rest of my career. I want the relationship that Leonardo DiCaprio and Martin
Mm.
Scorsese have, and I imagine that Mikey Madison might feel similar about Sean Baker because the way that they work together and the way that they're talking together on their press tour, it's almost as if they understand each other so well to the point that if another role was created, it almost seems logical that Sean Baker would return to Mikey Madison. And
Right.
he may not do that. I mean, he might go in a different direction, but I'd love to see her continue progressing as an actress, especially in this type of role where it's drama. It's not Scream, and it's not a one-liner in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood where she's getting lit up by a flamethrower from Leonardo DiCaprio. I think this is the exact performance everybody in the world needs to see, because then you understand, oh, this is somebody who can fucking act. This is somebody who
Yeah.
knows what she's doing. So while we're wrapping this up, let's talk briefly about A24 and Neon. These are two studios, two production companies that really came out. I mean, Neon, to my understanding, has been around longer, and they've been really defining themselves as a company, like defining themselves. And I say that because when I look at the films that they were making in the mid 2010s, so 2010 to 2020, those films in comparison to post 2020, they're substantially different. A24 has kind of been on a similar trajectory ever since they started, which I believe was also around 2015. So, what are your thoughts here in terms of their marketing campaigns, their limited release schedule, which seems to be similar to both of them, but also
Mhm.
like the weight and expectations that you have when you see a movie made from Neon or a movie made from A24? What's that conversation like internally for you?
So first, I want to say that A24 to me is, and I mean this in the nicest way possible, but it's like baby's first indie studio, and by that I mean like it's not a knock on A24, but as time has gone on, it feels like A24 is kind of getting high on its own supply. It sort of understands and knows what it is. And I don't
Yeah.
necessarily love that. They have these limited releases as if it's a badge of honor, like, oh, no one's going to be able to see this movie. And those who do, they'll be able to talk about it and only heighten the anticipation for everybody else. And I might be being a little cynical and a little biased because I never get to see A24 movies when they're released. But I do think that there's this odd, let's wait 6 months when it's released in America to release it in Australia. And then there's this weird, let's release it 4 different times. We'll give it a limited release in New York and Los Angeles. Then we'll give it limited release in 50 of the biggest cities. Then we'll give it a big release in cities over a certain population. And then we'll finally release it to everybody. And by then, the hype has died down. People can't engage in the same conversations. But and it feels to me like they're doing it on purpose almost. But I also think that I respect the shit out of what A24 does, because they let directors do what they want to do. And they definitely just they purchase movies that are definitely an authentic vision. And I think that it's more based in grounded, what they're trying to say is something everyone can engage with. It's not some Iron Man, I'm going to blow up New York City, someone has to stop me kind of thing. Whereas here it's just let's talk about trauma. Let's talk about generational trauma. Let's talk about immigration. And so you get more of these human driven stories, and the actors are all giving performances that blow your, every movie that A24 has. It's almost like there's at least 1 or 2 performances where you're like, my mind is blown. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They find these niche movies that just, it's so character driven rather than story. And I love that. Neon to me is one that is sort of like A24 in that they're picking these movies that feel authentic, and they're trying to be more character driven than really story driven, but they release them almost in a more timely manner, and they're willing to spend millions of dollars in marketing because they know that they'll get it all back. I mean, look at Longlegs. That movie was everywhere. They were advertising that every possible way they could. They even made a phone number you could call. Whereas in Anora's case, they were having pop-up shops in places. They had billboards taken out on these avenues. And so I just think that they're willing to go there. They're willing to spend the money in order to get more people in the seats and make it more widely available. I do think that Neon's Palme d'Or wins are more meaningful to me than A24's Academy wins, because what I mean by that is that A24 is definitely more in the zeitgeist. Everybody knows A24 now. So A24, they're so well known that people will be like, that aren't super into movies now know, hey, that's an A24 movie. I'm at least a little intrigued because they've seen one movie here or there that has sparked an interest in that. Whereas Neon is a little more low key. So I think their movies don't do as well, maybe commercially or just even in movie circles, because A24 has just so much more with their name and what they're doing and the weight that comes with that. But I think in real critical circles, Neon is more well regarded, and that is so evident by their Palme d'Or wins.
Okay. Yeah, I was looking up while you were sharing that. I was just trying to compare and contrast the movies that have come out for both production companies this year. Because though I think, yeah, they're obviously different, I think there's more in line with what they're doing as to what you're saying. I mean, they're character-focused films. They're also filmmaker-focused films. So whenever you have the Palme d'Or, that's typically made by a filmmaker who doesn't have a huge budget, but who has a lot of autonomy and decision making in what they want to pursue, and vice versa. Same with A24. I almost get the same exact vibe. And so when I think of A24, it's funny to me because I think it's just logo. If you put their logo on anything, it cannot be an A24 product, and people are going to go see it. That's how well their logo has evolved in terms of the zeitgeist, or how marketable it is, or how well everybody knows it. But I would almost imagine that the film quality feels a little different. I almost feel like Neon is looking for films that are unexpected. They're stories that are unexpected. So when you watch, you're like, whoa, okay. Even Longlegs, whoa, okay. Whereas A24, I think they're trying to tell you a really honest story that can be The Whale, that can be Heretic. They're just trying to be honest, and rather than strip everything out and give you the studio inflection of what they're trying to tell you, they're just trying to say, hey, here's an hour and a half to 2 hours to 2.5 hours of a movie. You might love it. You might hate it. You might want to walk out. You might not want to walk out. You might tell your friends about it. You might not tell your friends about it. But at the end of the day, you will say that it was an honest film. It was one that wanted to tell something of true substance, rather than something just to get your ass in the seat and give you nothing in return after the movie ends. And I think that Neon is very similar in that way, but I think Neon's a little flashier. I feel like they're trying to gravitate to flashier stories. The Triangle of Sadness, the Longlegs, these are flashier stories to The Whale and to Heretic and to these other A24 products that have been coming out. I don't know where they're going in terms of like their marketing's great. Everybody knows A24 and Neon. I think they're making a name for themselves. They're making a new name for themselves, dare I say. But in terms of the theater presence, I don't know what to anticipate. I don't know what to get from that. And so whether they're succeeding or failing, I think that's up to them to decide. But for me, when I do see A24 as a cinema fan or Neon, I am instantly more excited. Whether the product is going to be shitty or not, I'm instantly more excited because I kind of know the gravitas of what they have accomplished and what they're trying to accomplish. So then it gives me a sense of like a first foot in of knowing, oh, I think I know what I'm going to get from this thing. And typically
Mm.
the expectation lives up to some degree. It might not be my favorite film, but it's at least going to be one that I walk out and say, holy shit, like, wow, okay, that was a lot. Past lives. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Wow. That was a lot. Like you just start thinking more. Whereas if I come out, and I hate to use Marvel always in the negative sense, but when I walk out of a Marvel film, at least in today's day and age, it's like, whoa, either A, that was a lot of CGI. B, I don't feel like that gave me the oomph that I really wanted. Or C, those performances felt a little forced, but obviously so. They're in a studio with green screens and CGI wrapped around
Mhm.
them. So yeah, that makes a little bit more sense. So these two are the grounded, raw production companies that are really trying to get bigger and bigger. So I am curious. I want to know your thoughts on this. If there was an A24 theater, a theater chain, an A24 theater chain, like a Cinemark or an AMC or something, do you think they would succeed? Where they like maybe they only have two theaters in or two screens in those theaters, but they just show A24 films, and so now you know what you're going to get. You're always going to get an A24 product. Would that succeed, or is that just too niche?
I think it would succeed now. I definitely think like if you'd asked me 5 years ago, no. Neon's sort of in that position, I would say no. But A24 has built up such a catalog of films, such a diverse catalog of films, and so much like weight with their name now that they could just be like, here, we're gonna show Inside. What's that movie with Charlie Sheen? They have a movie with Charlie Sheen that's just ass. It's one of the worst movies I've ever seen. It's actually the first movie they released, but they could put that up, and people are just gonna go want to watch it because it's A24 and they can see it in theaters. Whereas I don't think Neon's quite at that level yet. And you know how I can tell these aren't really studios on the same level, like distribution companies on the same level as that. A24 is acquiring rights to IP. They want to do more TV shows. They want to get involved in that sphere. They want to start doing these franchise movies. Whereas Neon is like, let's just keep making these one-off bangers, these very authentic original movies. And so I think that's why they're in different, they're kind of in different leagues now because A24 is starting to move in that atmosphere where they're like, well, let's start making TV shows. Let's start buying IP. Let's lean
Mm.
more into action-y style movies. We saw that with Civil War. They're trying to do these more expensive movies. They're trying to give more production, whereas Neon is like, you got $6 million, or they make an offer on a movie and it's very low budget. You know what I mean? And so I truly think that they're playing on different fields. But even if Neon got to that level of A24, I still don't think that Neon goes that route. They're so honest in their approach, where A24 is doing the Crystal Lake series with Peacock. Like
Yeah,
that is
yeah.
so out of the realm of what A24 is that it made me like scratch my head. I was like, what's the thought here? And that is definitely like, let's get involved in big money things. So let's get involved in a horror franchise and let's try to buy the IP to another thing. So I think they're definitely in that direction where they could absolutely have a theater and start showing exclusive movies and releasing their movies at this one theater for like a weekend and then release things wide. But I don't think Neon is on that level in any way or ever will be on that level, quite frankly.
Oh, okay. Okay. I feel like Neon, my personal opinion is that they are on the come up in terms of their marketing and their brand being a little bit more well known. I want to read these films. These are films that have released in 2024 or will release in 2024. And you tell me, would you rather take the A24 slate or the Neon slate? And just
Oh,
in
okay.
terms
I
of where
like
they're
this.
at right now, where they're at. So for Neon, we have Babes, we have Stress Positions, Cuckoo, Immaculate. We have The End, which is coming out this year, The Seed of a Sacred Fig, Anora, Long Legs, and then Steven Soderbergh's Presence, the horror film that's coming
Mm.
out here soon. On A24, we have Heretic, We Live in Time, A Different Man, Sing Sing, Maxine, Janet Planet, I Saw the TV Glow, The Front Room, Civil War, Love Lies Bleeding. Wow, they have more films, that's for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Are you thinking A24?
I think that I would definitely go A24, but I also think it's the bulk that they're able to buy and put out, or the bulk they're able to produce and put out. So I think, I mean, A24's slate is incredible. I think the highest highs of A24 are higher than what I would consider Neon's, but I think the lowest lows are lower for A24 than Neon. I think I can expect,
Oh, okay.
like when I think of The Front Room, my first thought is pee pee poo poo, because that movie, I mean, it is so covered in feces, literally. It is so shitty, literally, that it's like, why did you make this? Why did you release this? Why did you
Oh
buy
my
the rights
god.
to this? I don't get it. And then Immaculate, that's okay. I don't hate it, but like it's fine. But then you get Neon, and there's no movie that you listed besides Cuckoo that I'm not highly anticipating, or that I didn't super enjoy. I mean, Cuckoo, I still gave it 3 stars. Thought it was watchable. I still enjoyed parts of it. Whereas I think the lows for A24 are incredibly low, and I think it's because I don't think they release shit that they think is going to fail, but I think that they're proud of having a massive release schedule for the year. I think they're like, yeah, we have 20 films coming out this year. What
Yeah.
up? Even if the quality isn't fantastic on all of them.
This episode is gonna be titled the pee pee poo poo episode. So I want you to know that just got me so off the rails in the best way possible. A24 Neon. I will say this right now: if you are not somebody who focuses on production companies, or you see the distributors before you watch the film, keep an eye out for these. If you see a Neon logo or an A24 logo today, there's probably some sort of thought-provoking message behind the story that's being shown. It might be a little outrageous, it might be a little balls to the wall, but I think it's one that you won't walk away from saying, God, that was a waste of time. I feel like it's one of those that whether you like it or not, you'll probably walk away saying, all right, that was worth spending 2 hours of my time, because now I want to think about this, whether I love it or I hate it. And so look for the A24 logo, look for the Neon logo, go watch Anora, go watch Heretic. These are both in theaters right now, probably in limited release. I mean, to give context, Kyle had to go search like 150 theaters, like 150 miles outside of your area. Tell me, where did you go? How far did you have to go to see Anora?
I had to drive an hour south, but like you mentioned before that, the closest theater prior to me finding that was 151 miles away. And there was some serious debate on like, if I got to do it, I got to do it. But yeah, it was 150 miles away. It was the next closest showing.
Was it worth it? That's all I got to ask you.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I would drive an hour today to go watch it again if I had the time.
Boom. Drive an hour, go see Anora. It's worth the drive. It's worth the conversation afterwards. Kyle, what a phenomenal conversation. Anything that we left out? Anything that you want to add to the mix?
I feel like maybe I was a little negative on A24 here. I don't want to make it sound like I'm some film snob, or like that I don't like A24. I do. They're fantastic. I have the Talk to Me hand. Like I buy their merch. I trust their logos more when I see A24 or Neon. I get more excited than when I see Universal or Columbia.
Yes.
I would put Focus Features in the same realm as Neon. I get excited when I see that. WB, same thing as Universal. It's something else. It's a different thing. It's a different beast. So I think they're doing something entirely different. That's why I'm a little saddened to know that A24 is going down the IP route. But they're two logos I definitely trust. I just think Neon's a little more authentic than A24.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think A24 is getting bigger. Hopefully they hold true to the core of what made A24, what made the brand what they are today in 2024. I can't agree more. I think look for those smaller production companies that might even be associated with big companies like Warner Brothers or Universal, but the Searchlight Pictures, the IFC Midnights, the IFC in general, not even IFC Midnights, but the A24s, the Neons, these smaller production companies, even Four Films, which is a really small production company that is making a bigger and bigger name with the projects they're attaching themselves to. Keep an eye out for that. It's reverse psychology, in my opinion. If you can find a production company who is putting the money forward for something and you know what they're usually giving you, that is one way to understand, at least anticipate the quality of the film you're about to watch, rather than getting your hopes up on a topic that you really want to see portrayed on screen, and then it ends up being underwhelming or bad or not as thought provoking as you once anticipated. So keep an eye out for those little segments that will kind of, I don't know, give you a truer sense of what to anticipate. But Anora and Heretic are in theaters right now at the time of this recording. So go see them. If you want more of a thrilling film, go see Heretic. If you want more of an exhilarating human relationship type film, what did you call it, by the way? I liked your description of Anora.
What do you mean? I don't remember.
You said it was a romance. It was like the way you described
a romantic comedy epic.
Yeah, romantic comedy epic. It truly feels that way. It feels bigger than the $6 million budget that it had.
Yeah.
So go see this film. And in the meantime, be kind to one another. Watch more movies. We'll be back next week. Peace.
Boom.